My name is Larry Crow. I'm interviewer today for the History Makers. Our videographer is Matthew Hickey. Ma'am, could you please state your full name and spell it for us, please?
Joyce M. Gray, Joyce M. Gray, Gray.
All right. And this is your birth name is Joyce.
Joyce. My birth name is Joyce Ann Gray.
Ann Gray. Okay.
Joyce Ann Moore.
Okay.
So the M is for Moore.
Okay.
So it's Joyce Ann Moore Gray.
All right. And what is your date of birth and place of birth?
August 3rd, 1943, Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay. And ma'am, what is your occupation?
I'm a retired educator, recently turned consultant, educational consultant.
Okay. And what is today's date?
Today's date is March 13th, 2008.
And where are we at the present time?
Presently, we're at my home, which is at 815 West Germania Avenue in Murray, Utah.
All right, just right outside of Salt Lake City.
Just right outside of Salt Lake City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, before we go into depth, there are 5 lightweight People magazine-ish type questions that management compels me to ask that only require a short answer. The first one is, they're kind of like a warm-up. The first one is, do you have a favorite food?
Do I have a favorite food? Yes, I have a favorite food. And you want to know what it is?
Yes.
I enjoy eating fish, any kind of seafood.
Okay. Do you have a favorite color?
Yes, my favorite color is blue.
All right. A favorite time of the year?
Favorite time of the year is probably spring. Not too warm, not too cold.
Okay. A favorite vacation destination?
Favorite vacation destination is San Diego or cruising to St. Thomas, the Caribbean.
Okay. And the last one is, do you have a favorite phrase or saying?
Yes.
Okay.
My favorite saying is that as adults, we have to model the expectations that we have for children, for the youth. That's in what we do, what we say, everything. We have to model that expectation.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask about your family history.
Okay.
I'm going to ask about your mother's side of the family and your father's side. But we'll start with your mother's side first. Can you give us your mother's full name and spell it for us?
My mother's full name is Delma Mae Smith Moore. Delma Mae Smith Smith Moore Moore.
Okay. And what is her date of birth and place of birth?
She was born, what year was she born? She was born August 29th, 22 years before I was born.
Okay. So 1921, I guess.
1921.
All right. And where was she born?
She was born in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay. Now, what do you know about the ancestors on your mother's side? How far back, first of all, can you trace them? Do they go all the way back to slavery days, or?
Well, my sister has been working on that now for several years, and she's been able to trace it all the way back to about 1870, and that's just prior to slavery, or just right into slavery. And now she is in the process of going to look at documents in that area, like Bibles and other historical documents, seeing if she can find who the slave owner was of our ancestors and maybe trace it that way. But she gets stuck once she gets to a certain point. So back to about 1870.
Well, probably if she's going into slavery, it's back a little bit further than that, because we were free in 1870. So she's going back probably to the 50s or 60s, I guess.
Yeah, it might have been about 1860, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So has she uncovered anything?
Well, she's uncovered quite a bit regarding my mother and my mother's side of the family, and we have a family reunion every 2 years that involves the Smiths, the Epps, the Jenkins, and the Livermans, who are all ancestors that have come, over the years. So, yeah, she's been able to find quite a bit. She is, we call her the roots in the family.
Well, are there any stories from that period of time? I mean, do they know, what some of your ancestors did? What kind of work they did, or what? Are there any stories associated with what they were doing?
She hasn't shared that with me if she's found anything like that.
Okay. So, do you have a general impression that they were farmers, or did they have any special skills, or?
I have a general impression from what she shared with me that they were probably farmers in that area, and working on farmland in that area. Sometimes working for people, probably white people at that time, because they didn't own any property. And I can remember back as with regards to my grandmother, that's on the other side, and her sisters, and then the woman that raised my mother, stories of them talking about how they had grown up on farms in that area, and things like that.
Okay. And so the family has a history that it's all around the Portsmouth area? Really?
Yes.
There's no other place that they talk about?
Nope, not that she's told me.
Okay. Now, did you know your grandparents?
I did not know my grandparents. My mother's mother died when she was very young, probably at 12 years old. And my mother, there were 13 of them, and my mother was, she was the third oldest child, and so she was the third oldest. She was the third oldest child, and she was the girl. So she ended up having to basically raise the younger children after her mother passed.
Okay. Does she have any stories to tell about that experience?
Well, my mother did that for about 2 years, and then before she met my father, because she got married when she was 14 years old. And even after she and my dad got married and she had her first child, she was still taking care of some of her younger siblings, my aunts and uncles at that time that were very young. There were twins in the family. There were 2 sets of twins that she had to care for, as well as the other children.
Okay, so she didn't have, her childhood was kind of cut short, I guess.
Her childhood was cut very short.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at 14 she was married and she started having her family.
She was taking care of the rest of her brothers and sisters at 12, I guess.
Taking care of the rest of her brothers and sisters at 12.
And married at 14.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was your father still around?
Her father?
Yeah, her father.
And I don't hear that much. I didn't hear my mother talking that much about her father, but I knew the father was in their lives. I'd never heard her saying that much about it, and I'm thinking that he must have passed before my grandmother did. So that's why she ended up having to take care of the children. And I think during those times, it wasn't that men totally left out of the lives of the women, but they weren't as involved, and her dad probably wasn't as involved in raising the family as her mother had been.
So, do you suppose she had other relatives that helped out, maybe when after her mother passed?
I don't recall her talking about other relatives helping out. It sounded to me like my mother and her older brothers kind of had to fend for the family and take care of everyone.
So she had older brothers?
She had a couple of older brothers because she's like the third oldest child. And but she was the girl in the family, so I guess it just fell on her at the age of 12 to take care of those younger brothers and sisters.
Yeah, so she had to be the woman of the house, I guess.
She had to be the woman of the house.
At age 12, and they did the heavy farm work, I guess.
Yes,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I understand. So your mother was married at age 14.
Yes.
And I know from looking at the pictures that she became a nurse. Now,
Yes.
Did she was she able to finish school before she got married, or did she have to finish after?
She didn't finish school, before 14, but when she started having children later on in her life, when I believe it was when I got up some size, I was the fourth child that she had, and her last child was 5 years after me. Before that, she had been having children every 2 years, and then I can remember being very young when I started to school. She started working. She started working in the laundry at the Naval Hospital, and then she went on and she learned how to do hair. So she became a at-home beautician. And then later on, she went back to school when I was in junior high school. About junior high school, she went back and got her GED. And then once she got her GED, she had been working at the Naval Hospital, and so she had gotten to know doctors and nurses and people in that field while she was working in the laundromat over at the hospital. And later on, she just went on and pursued a license in nursing and became an LPN nurse.
Okay. About what year did she get her degree as an LPN?
I'm going to say it was 1959, 60.
Okay. All right. Now, okay. So she did. So did she retire as a nurse? Did she work?
She did. She retired as a nurse from the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia. LPN nurse. She was working in pediatrics.
Okay.
At the Naval Hospital.
Okay. Now, can you give us your father's full name and spell it for us?
Elmo, E-L-M-O, Leonard, Leonard, Moore, Sr.
Okay. So his name is very popular now, Elmo with
Oh, yeah.
Sesame Street. So.
That's right.
Yeah. And what is his name?
The craziest thing happened when I moved to Salt Lake City. Met a very dear friend. We're like sisters now, both AKAs, of course. But she wasn't pregnant at that time. And then we would go skiing, and then finally one day she said, I'm going to have a baby. So she had a little girl. And just out of the clear blue, she started calling this child Elmo. I said, why did you call her Elmo? She doesn't know why. She just called her Elmo. But the child's name is not Elmo.
Okay.
But that was the nickname. I thought that was kind of odd.
That is odd.
Yeah. But Elmo is a popular name now because of that toy animal.
Yeah, on Sesame Street.
Uh-huh.
Who is actually the only black character. Well, it's voiced by a black puppeteer.
Is it? Elmo is?
Yeah. Kevin, I can't think of his last name. At any rate, but that's, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Let's see. And what is your father's date of birth and place of birth?
Well, my dad is 5 years older than my mother. So she was 21. So 5 from 21. Okay. So.
Okay, 1916, I guess. Or?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
And my dad was born July 14th.
Okay.
In Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay. Now, what do you know about his side of the family? How far back can you trace them?
Actually, I don't have a lot of information on him. I knew his mother, my grandmother, because she helped to raise us. So I knew her very well, and I knew that his father, we never met his father. We knew our stepfather, but that's as far back as I know it goes back to the Trotters, and my sister's studying that part of the history as well.
So it goes back to a family.
Trotters.
Yeah.
Yes, my grandmother's maiden name was Trotter.
Okay.
And so it goes back to the Trotters.
Okay. Now, is she related to the famous trotters, the William Monroe trotter? And,
I'm not
okay.
sure. We'll
Okay.
find out.
All right. Okay. Um, so, are there any stories from your father's side of the family about slavery or Reconstruction or?
No. All I remember my grandmother and her sisters. My grandmother worked at the Naval Hospital too, and I just remember her working there all my life. She was a dietitian, and I remember her sisters, the two sisters that I knew, worked. They actually were housekeepers or house cleaners, and I remember going to work with her youngest sister sometimes to clean homes, because she would go out and she would ride a bus and go out to some white folks' homes and clean the homes, or she would go out to buildings and clean buildings. But that's as much as I can remember.
Okay, but they didn't tell any stories about what life was like down there. Did you get an impression from them what what it was like to live down there? What the parameters were, what the scene was.
What I gathered from them was that it was a very tight little community. They kind of lived all in the same sort of block or within blocks of each other in row-type homes or little cottages. I got an impression that life was tough, that they had to work all the time, they had to work hard, and that on weekends was the time to relax. On Friday nights, they would go out and they would get fish so that they could have fish on Saturday and fish for breakfast on Sunday morning. But I got the impression that life was tough, that nothing was easy for them, that they had to work a lot.
Okay. Now, did your father ever talk about what his goals were, and if he was satisfied with what he was doing? Or now he worked primarily as a farmer. Is that
no?
True?
My dad. The work that I remember him doing was he was in the Navy when I was younger,
Okay.
and I remember him leaving home to go and serve duty in the Navy, and then coming home. But then when he got out of the Navy, he went to the Naval Shipyard, and he worked there as a foreman at the Naval Shipyard. My dad. I got the impression that my dad expected more of himself than he was able to really get out of life before he passed away, because I got the impression that he was quite intelligent and that he had wanted to pursue other things in life, but he ended up really just being a foreman. As far as he could see, that was as far up as he could go in life, was to be that foreman at the Naval Shipyard. But that he really wanted more out of life. He just couldn't have it. And so one of the things I remember him and my mother saying was that it was important for us to go on and go to school and not complain, because they wanted more for us out of life than they had gotten for themselves. And my mother would often say, you have to be careful out there. You don't want to start your family too soon, because it was hard on her to go back and get her high school diploma rather than get it when, before she got married at 14. So she always impressed upon us to do that first and then think about moving on with your life.
Okay. So so now, did your father have a chance to finish school before he went to the Navy? Now, that was World War II, right? Was he drafted into World War II, or did he join, or what happened?
I think he signed up
Okay.
to go, yes. And he did finish high school. He finished I.C. Norcom High School in Portsmouth, Virginia. So he graduated from high school. My mother was 14.
I'm sorry, I.C.
I.C. Norcom, N-O-R-C-O-M, N-O-R-C-O-M.
Okay.
I period, C period, Norcom
Okay.
in Portsmouth, Virginia.
I.C. Norcom High School. Now, do you know who I.C. Norcom was? I imagine it's somebody black down there they named the school for, but I don't know.
Must have been, I don't know.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. Okay. So he finished high school before he went
He
to
did. He had finished high school by the time he and my mother got married. and she was 14, he was 19. So he had already completed high school.
Okay. Now, tell us something about how they met. And is there a story associated with how they met? Did they tell a story?
Let me think. Well, my mother wasn't supposed to be dating because she was way too young. And my grandmother would say to my dad, "You leave that girl alone because, she's just a girl. You finished high school, you're a young man, you leave that girl alone." But they had to sneak around and see each other. And that's what happened. And that's how they met, sneaking around in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So he didn't heed their advice?
No, he didn't.
Okay. So now when you think about your parents' personalities, their talents and dispositions, and who do you think you take after the most?
I think I take a lot after my mother. Some with my dad, but I think I take most of my characteristics after my mother. She was a very soft-spoken woman, but she was a very determined person. And I think that can be seen in the fact that she finished high school and got married so young, but yet she went on and, not high school, she finished high school after she had gotten married. And she got married so young at age 14, but then she persevered and went on and got her high school certificate by completing her GED, and then went on to become a nurse. I think she had a determination to do something in her life too. And she was kind of reserved about hers. My dad was a little more outspoken about where he wanted to go in life, but he never did get where he wanted to go. And she kind of sat back and made a determination that she wanted to do something, and she did it. And all the while, she did that while she was still raising her children. And I think she just instilled in me, you do something with your life, because if you don't, no one else is going to do it for you. And I think she had a quiet, strong spirit about her that some of it just rubbed off on me.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, what is it that your dad wanted to do you think, that he didn't get a chance to do?
I think my dad wanted to own a business, or he wanted to be a politician, or he wanted to be a lawyer, something like that, because he talked a lot, and he knew that he was intelligent, but there was something that was holding him back from moving forward with his life.
Did he talk about his experiences in the Navy? Now, we've interviewed a lot of people that were in the Navy during the war, or soldiers too, and it wasn't easy being in World War II. Did he ever talk about what happened over there? The Navy was supposed to be particularly tough because you're at sea, and and they were restrictive on what black sailors could do and couldn't do.
I think my dad did what he needed to do and kept out of trouble, but he was always glad to come home. So I'm not sure that he truly enjoyed his experience in the Navy. He never said that it was the greatest thing in life for him. I think he joined the Navy anticipating that this would take him to some other point in his life and help him to reach his dream, and it didn't. He did end up getting out of the Navy, and when he got out of the Navy, that's when he went to the shipyard and started working there.
Okay. All right, but he didn't have no stories you remember about what happened in the Navy, or?
Mm-mm.
So he didn't even talk about it?
No. Not that I can remember. Mm.
Did he go very far away from the U.S., or did he stay around?
He didn't go very far away. He was in Michigan. He was up north of where we lived, but it wasn't out of the country.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that the Great Lakes Naval Training Center
Yes.
on Lake Michigan?
Yes. Yes.
Near Chicago?
I remember that being one of the ones. Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Now, do you have an earliest childhood memory?
Do I have an
Earliest.
my earliest childhood memory? My earliest childhood memory is probably when we lived on 2nd Avenue in Portsmouth, Virginia, which was just right around the corner from the ballpark. And I believe that ballpark, well, it might be gone by now. But my earliest memory was that we lived in this 2-story home, and it was my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, the one that's the historian, and my older sister. And my older sister spent a lot of time with my grandmother on my dad's side. My grandmother on my dad's side, my aunt, was close to my oldest sister's age, and they spent a lot of time together. But I remember my dad putting the kids that were at home, that would be my sister Margaret, my brother, and me, putting us on his bicycle and riding us on his bike, 3 people, along with the biker, taking us from our home on 2nd Avenue to my grandmother's house, and she lived on Effingham Street in Portsmouth, Virginia. So when I was able to walk it by myself, I thought that was quite a distance for a biker to put 3 kids on. But he would take us around on his bike, and that was one of the places he would transport us to.
How was that done? I mean, three kids and
If I remember correctly, I remember there was a basket on the front, and I remember being placed in that basket a lot. And then I remember seeing people on the back of the bicycle. So I think there was a rack on the back where my brother and my sister could sit, and then my dad would be on the bike. Now that was before he got his first car that I can remember. And the first car I remember him having was this old Chrysler. It was a big car. And then after he got the Chrysler, then we were still on 2nd Avenue. He would put us all in the car, and then he would drive us different places. And one of the furthest places we ever went was to Washington, D.C. in the Chrysler. So, I mean, I have other little memories of early childhood. You want to hear them?
well, yes. We always ask this question. You mentioned something interesting though. The ballpark. Was that what was the ballpark? Was that
It was a baseball ballpark.
Okay.
It's a baseball field. And I can remember walking over to the baseball field and had bars on the front of the baseball field. And we were so small, we didn't have money to go in, but we were so small, we could put our heads through the bars, turn our bodies around, and go in and watch the games.
Now, were those the Negro Leagues playing there, or who was playing there? Do you know?
No, I don't remember seeing Negro leagues. I remember seeing white
Okay.
leagues. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I also remember, I remember that ballpark. And then I remember we lived on 2nd Avenue, and our house was like the last house on 2nd Avenue before this wide open field. And beyond that field was where white people lived. So the whites started that neighborhood on the other side of the field. And I can remember my mother saying to us, don't go across that field. You can play in the field, you can play at home, but don't go into the field.
Okay. We're going to pause here and change tape.